Hi there, I'm Sandy Allnock here for Ellen Hudson, and I'm going to be doing a watercolor card with the Fairy Happy stamp set from MFT for World Watercolor Month. World Watercolor Month happens every July, and I'll tell you a little bit more about some other fun things that are going on, but I'm going to be painting this card using the Daniel Smith dot card and this really cute stamp set. Isn't this sweet? It has lots of flowers in it, and I didn't add a lot of flowers to mine, but you can do a lot with this one. I've stamped the two images in Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink on Arches cold press watercolor paper, and this is the dot card. It actually has physical dots of paint on it. So if you've wanted to try watercolors and you don't really want to buy a whole set, you're not really sure, and you don't know what colors to get and that sort of thing, this is a great way to start. Daniel Smith asked me for my favorite 18 colors, and then they printed up this card, and then they have somebody by hand put all these dots onto the card so that you can test out the paint. And what I'm doing here is taking a wet brush, touching it to the paint, and then moving it onto my paper. You generally want to mix on the paper rather than mixing on a palette with this, simply because there's a very small amount of paint and you don't want to leave any behind on your palette. So mixing on the paper makes a lot of sense here. And you can just paint while it's still wet, drop another little color in there, and alter the color that it came out in the first place. So for skin, for instance, what I'm doing with both of these is to put some quinacridone burnt orange down. And her skin looks a little too orangey for me, so I can tone that down and change that color a little bit by adding a little tiny bit of sepia. And I'm adding it in the areas where I would put shadows, like under her hair or down around the bottom of her chin. And then I can use water and a damp brush, not a pool of water, but just a damp brush to move the color around, and that softens that oranginess. And you can do this with all different kinds of colors too. If you have other watercolors, just mix them on the paper in small amounts until the color comes out looking like what you want it to, knowing that generally watercolors are going to dry back lighter than they went on. So you want to check your work at the end just to make sure none of your colors dried back so much that they gave you something unexpected. The brush that I'm using is by the Silver Brush Company. It's from their Black Velvet line, and this one is a number 8. If you're only going to get one brush as a card maker, I would get the number 8. If you're potentially going to do some large background type things, you might want to go for a number 12 as well. So my 8 and my 12 are the ones I use the most. And these brushes hold a lot of pigment and a lot of water, but they also, as you can see, they point really well. You can get a very fine point even on a number 8 brush. There are a lot of people who like to use a 2 or a 4, but I just really feel like I get more of a watercolor look when I use a larger brush. I learned that from a watercolor artist on YouTube and was so impressed with her work that I said, oh, I'll try it. And I started using a larger brush, and it was really amazing the difference that it made in my work, because it made me a little less interested in being super fussy. So I can get fussy in something like this and trying to get my brush into those little areas, but I'm also a little looser in other areas since I'm using a larger brush. But you can see I can get a different kind of pink. The girl on the right has a darker pink than the one on the left. So you can alter the colors based on how much pigment you put on each one. And you can also tell by the looks of that dot card, I've not used up a lot of the paint on there. So if you're looking to try some paints, you don't want to buy a whole set, it's really expensive, you can't afford that, but you really want to try watercolors, this dot card is a great way to try some out without having to have a giant investment in it. And I even use these dot cards when I travel. I just take one in my bag with me and do my Bible journaling or something with them on a plane. So it really works well to not have to worry so much about carrying all your supplies. Then you just need a brush and a little bit of water in order to do some painting. So I'm using some sepia for her hair, and I'm not really stressing out with this whole thing about trying to put lots of shadows or anything in this. I'm just going to color this in because the cool part on this one is going to be the background, that really fun splashy background. The rest of this, I just want some nice colors in here, make a really happy image, and that's going to leave a lot of room to focus on the fun background. The quinacridone gold there's a couple other yellows, but the quinacridone gold can double as a brown if you use it in heavily pigmented terms, or it can be a yellow like that if you have more water. So that colors can often alternate based on exactly how much water you use along with the pigment. Now for the background, I'm just painting some clean water first and just covering that background area. I'm not getting really close to the images because what I'm going to do now is drop the pigment into that little wet puddle, and I can move it around to the edges and move it toward the edges of the image after it's already on there. So I don't have to worry about doing that when the water goes down, but the water gives the paint a chance to move. It gives it a place to go to. If you're interested in learning some more about some great watercolor backgrounds, there's a new class, brand new, over on my new website, art-classes.com. There'll be a link on the Ellen Hutson blog as well as under this video for watercolor backgrounds. And you can actually do a lot in that watercolor backgrounds class using this dot card. It may not get you through everything, but you can do a lot with it. So it's a great way to start out and learn some techniques to do that. So here I've got two colors that I've dropped in here. I'm just painting more water as I want to spread the color out more and just dropping it into those puddles. If I get an area that's too dark, I can just put more water on it and move it around. But now I'm adding this pearlescent shimmer, which is one of my favorite colors to add on top of something, especially something sparkly like this. Because the pearlescent shimmer, if you have it in a palette, you can mix it in with the paints themselves, or you can wait till it's all done and dried like I am here, and I'm just adding it to a few choice places on my card. Now this is the finished piece, and you can tell it's a little on the wobbly side, so I'm using some Be Creative tape to tape it down and adhere it onto my card. You can also use ATG tape. It's the only other one that I know is really good and strong, because watercolor paper tends to warp no matter how good it is and how many times you've taped it down or anything. So I often find that just using a really seriously good adhesive and using layers of paper makes a big difference. So I've got it all the way around the edges, and then all I have to do is peel the tape off, and this is the 1/2 inch. I use the 1/2 inch probably the most. And then I'm going to adhere it onto a layer of black cardstock. And then I can use whatever I want underneath of that cardstock. It's going to be normal cardstock to cardstock adherence. But putting that first layer down with the Be Creative tape makes a big difference. So now I'm going to use some of the foam tape to pop up this layer on my card. I've got it all the way around the outside edges so nothing sags and doesn't get like flattened on one side when the card goes through the mail, and a little bit in the middle so it doesn't sag in the middle either, and then pop it onto my card base. And now I'm going to do my final embellishing. I wait until I get it all on there because otherwise I have to wait for the glossy accents to dry before I can adhere my card together. So I did all that first. And I'm putting glossy accents on the wings. You could also sprinkle some glitter on top of the glossy accents and stick that on there, which would be kind of cool. But I'm going to then put a couple of dots of the glossy accents down and add a few of these sequins, some pretty pink posh sequins. And I'm not going to add it on every single dot, but just on some of them. And I'm using this quick stick picker upper thing, whatever the name of this thing is. It's really helpful in picking up sequins. If you've ever had them stick to your fingers and you're trying to move them around, this one has two ends. One picks it up and the other helps to stick it back down, that sort of thing. And then I thought I liked the look of having some of those little dots, so I added more of them. And look how much sparkle I got on this card. So pretty and so twinkly. And this is the finished one. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to see any of the supplies or links that I've talked about, please go to the blog, or you can look in the description down below. Have a wonderful World Watercolor Month, and I hope you get a chance to do some painting. Bye-bye.